There is a moment in a man's life that most people miss because it doesn't look dramatic on the outside, but internally it changes everything. It is the moment he realizes that the world is not reacting to what he says, what he owns, or even what he claims to be, but to how stable he remains when pressure is applied. You have seen it before without fully understanding it. A man gets challenged publicly, insulted indirectly, ignored deliberately, or tested emotionally. And while others rush to respond, to defend, to prove, he does nothing. Not out of weakness, not out of confusion, but out of control. And in that stillness, something unsettling happens. The room begins to shift toward him. Attention bends in his direction. Respect, unspoken but undeniable, begins to form. Because in a world addicted to reaction, the man who does not react becomes unpredictable, and what cannot be predicted cannot be controlled. Most men have been trained, almost conditioned, to believe that power is expressed through action. Speak louder, respond faster, defend yourself immediately, make your position clear. But Machiavelli understood something far more dangerous, something that most men never fully grasp even after years of experience. He observed that power is not in how quickly you move, but in how little you reveal when others expect movement. Because every reaction you give is not just a response, it is information. It tells people where your limits are, what affects you, what threatens you, and most importantly, what controls you. The moment you react without control, you expose your internal structure to the outside world. You give them a map. And once someone has your map, they no longer need to guess how to move you. They simply follow the pattern you revealed. This is why calm is not a personality trait. It is not something you are born with. It is a discipline, a decision, a form of restraint that separates men who are ruled by their environment from men who rule themselves regardless of the environment. A calm man is not emotionless. That is a common misunderstanding. He feels everything, the insult, the tension, the pressure, the silent disrespect, but he chooses what becomes visible, and that distinction is everything. Because the world does not respond to what you feel, it responds to what you show. And the man who controls what he shows controls how he is perceived, and perception, not truth, is what governs social power. Now understand this clearly. These 7 situations are not random moments, they are patterns, recurring psychological environments where most men collapse without realizing it. Situations where emotion rises faster than thought, where instinct overrides discipline, and where the average man reveals more than he intends. And every time that happens, something subtle but permanent is lost. Authority. Not loud authority, not forced dominance, but the quiet kind, the kind that does not need to announce itself because it is felt immediately. These are the moments where men separate themselves without speaking, where the difference between reaction and control becomes visible to everyone watching, even if they cannot explain it. The first situation where calm men win while others lose is when they are publicly challenged, not attacked directly in an obvious way, but challenged in a manner designed to provoke a reaction. It could be a comment disguised as humor, a subtle contradiction in front of others, or a question that is not meant to seek clarity, but to test composure. Most men fail here because they interpret the moment as something that must be corrected immediately. They rush to defend their position, to explain themselves, to restore what they feel is being threatened. But what they do not realize is that the challenge was never about truth, it was about control. The person initiating it is not measuring your answer, they're measuring your reaction. They're watching your timing, your tone, your emotional shift, and the moment you react too quickly, too defensively, you confirm what they were testing for, that you can be moved. A calm man understands something different. He understands that not every challenge deserves engagement, that sometimes the highest form of control is not answering immediately, but allowing the moment to sit. He does not rush to correct the narrative because he knows that reacting too quickly gives the other person authority over the pace of the interaction. Instead, he slows down, he looks, he listens, and if he speaks, he does so without urgency. And that lack of urgency creates something powerful. It removes the tension from him and places it on the other person, because now the person who initiated the challenge is no longer in control of the flow. They are waiting. And the moment someone is waiting on you, the dynamic has already shifted. There is something deeply uncomfortable about a man who cannot be rushed. It breaks expectation. It disrupts the psychological rhythm most people rely on, because the average interaction follows a predictable pattern: action, reaction, escalation. But when one side refuses to follow that pattern, the structure collapses, and the person who expected control suddenly finds themselves uncertain. And uncertainty is where power begins to move. Machiavelli understood this when he wrote that men judge more by appearances than by reality, and what appears calm under pressure is interpreted as strength, regardless of what is actually happening internally. So while most men try to win the argument, the calm man wins the perception, and perception, once established, rarely needs to be defended again. The truth is simple but difficult to live by. You do not need to respond to every challenge. You need to respond correctly to the right ones, and the ability to distinguish between the two is what separates reactive men from strategic men, because the man who reacts to everything is predictable, and predictability is the easiest form of control. But the man who chooses when to engage and when to remain still becomes something else entirely. He becomes difficult to read, difficult to provoke, and ultimately difficult to control. And that is where real power begins.
It moves the feedback the other person is looking for, because provocation without reaction creates imbalance. The person pushing becomes exposed, their effort becomes visible, their need to provoke becomes obvious, and in that exposure, their position weakens, while the calm man who has not moved appears grounded, controlled, and unaffected. And that perception changes everything. Because in any interaction, the one who appears least affected holds the most control. Not because he dominates, but because he cannot be dominated. The fifth situation is when your weaknesses are brought into the light, your past mistakes, your failures, your struggles, the parts of your life that once carried weight. Most men try to hide these things. They become defensive when they're mentioned, or they avoid them completely. But avoidance is a signal. It tells others that there is still something there that can be used, that the wound is still open. A calm man does not hide his past. He integrates it. He becomes comfortable with it, to the point where it no longer carries emotional charge. So when someone brings it up, he does not react. He acknowledges it without tension. And in doing so, he removes its power. Because people can only use what still affects you. The moment it no longer affects you, it becomes useless as leverage, and the person who tried to expose you is left with nothing. This is a level of control that cannot be faked. It comes from internal work, from accepting what was and refusing to let it define what is. The sixth situation is when people expect you to defend yourself immediately. This is a subtle but powerful trap. You enter a room, a conversation, or a situation where something has already been said about you, and the atmosphere is waiting for your reaction, your explanation, your justification. And most men rush into it. They feel the pressure and respond instantly. But in doing so, they accept the frame that they are on trial, that they owe an explanation right now on someone else's timeline. A calm man rejects that pressure. He controls the pace. He does not rush. He does not allow urgency to dictate his response. And that control of pace shifts the entire dynamic, because the person who controls the pace controls the interaction. And when you are not rushed, when you are not pressured into speaking before you are ready, you remain in control of your position. You speak when you choose, how you choose, and if you choose. And that freedom is power. The seventh and final situation is when someone is trying to read you, not through words, but through observation. They watch your reactions, your expressions, your tone. They look for signals that reveal what you are thinking, what you are feeling, what affects you. And most men give everything away without realizing it. Their face, their voice, their timing, everything becomes readable. And once you are readable, you are predictable. And once you are predictable, you are controllable. A calm man understands the value of being unreadable. Not cold, not disconnected, but controlled. He feels everything, but reveals selectively. He chooses what becomes visible and what remains internal. And this creates something powerful, uncertainty. And uncertainty makes people cautious. It forces them to second guess. It removes their ability to move confidently against you because they cannot predict your response. And what cannot be predicted cannot be easily manipulated. This is the deeper truth behind all of this. Calm is not about avoiding conflict. It is about controlling yourself within it. It is about understanding that every situation is not just an event, but a test of your discipline, your awareness, your ability to remain centered when everything around you is trying to move you. Most men fail these tests, not because they are weak, but because they are unaware. They do not see the game being played. They only feel the pressure, and they react. But once you see it, once you understand that every reaction is information, that every emotional response is a signal, you begin to move differently. You begin to choose differently. You stop reacting automatically and start responding intentionally. And over time, that changes how people see you, how they interact with you, how they approach you. Because the man who cannot be easily moved becomes the man others must adjust to. Machiavelli understood that power is rarely loud. It is not always visible. It often exists in restraint, in timing, in what is not said as much as what is said. And the man who learns this does not need to force respect. He becomes it, not through dominance, not through aggression, but through control. Control of himself first, and through that, control of every situation he walks into. So remember this, the world will continue to test you. People will provoke, ignore, challenge, observe, and push. That will never stop. But what can change is how you respond. And the moment you stop giving away your internal state freely, the moment you become selective with your reactions, everything shifts. Because now you are no longer playing the game unconsciously. You are playing it deliberately. And that is where the difference is made. If this opened your eyes, if you felt something shift in the way you see yourself and the way you move through the world, then you already know this is just the beginning. Like the video, share it with someone who needs to understand this before it costs them more than they realize, and subscribe to the channel, because this is where we break down the real mechanics of power, perception, and control without illusions. And remember this final truth. The man who controls his reactions controls his reality. The man who remains calm while others collapse does not just survive the situation, he owns it.